All right, we're joined in studio by somebody who's been here a couple of times, kind of a friend of the show, but this is a project. I don't want to call it a project. It's an experiment. It's a thought. What were you calling it before, Derek?
I think it's a bit of a thought experiment.
Thought experiment. Derek, you know him from Kent Falls Brewing. You actually helped me attempt to make a taco seasoning flavored beer.
Quite the opposite end of the spectrum from these purely wild, fermented, supernatural.
You can find Kent Falls throughout the Hudson Valley. You can also all over the place, really. I see you popping up a ton in New York City and places like that. So congratulations on all the success with that. But what we're talking about kind of pertains to that because it is fermented. But you did something that most people would consider completely insane. I also consider it completely insane. Right, as long as we clarified that you are included in the bunch that understands. The self-awareness of it is funny. You have a book that you've been working on. It's called The Fermented Man, A Year on the Front Lines of a Food Revolution. Tell us what the book is and what it was about and where it came from, where this idea began.
So I'd been homebrewing for a couple of years and really getting into like wild fermentations. Pretty early on in homebrewing, I got fascinated by like wild yeast and bacteria and kind of all these things outside the parameters of what you would typically find, especially at the time. At most bars, like just kind of cleaner, simpler beers. I was getting into the weirder, wilder stuff and started getting into making kombucha at home and different fermented foods, and started just to have this realization that there's this web connecting all these different culinary traditions. That the lactobacillus bacteria that I was using to sour the sour beers I was making was also in sauerkraut and kimchi and yogurt and cheese and cured meats, weirdly enough, where you don't even think of like, a lot of people are like, how would you ferment meat?
Yeah.
But salami and prosciutto and pepperoni and all these things that are actually like really common are all fermented and all share this genus of bacteria that just forms this kind of crazy network of fermentation. So I was realizing that and pretty much, just kind of holding a jar of sauerkraut in my hand one day. And I was like, this stuff is like so pervasive. There's so many different ways to ferment every type of food that you could probably just live off of it. And it's just like a dumb thought that I had. Like I was just, being a dumb kind of writer type thought. But I kind of got obsessed with that again as like a thought experiment and kept talking about it, and one thing led to another, and an editor approached me and said I should explore this as a book, and I did some research, and I thought, you really could probably live off this stuff, and it would be super challenging, and it's pretty insane, but I thought it would make a really interesting way to get people into fermentation who aren't going to buy a guidebook. They're not necessarily even going to go home and make their own sauerkraut, so they might not buy, a cookbook about fermented food. I wanted to write something that would be interesting, even if you never intend to make, your own kimchi at home.
So you had absolutely nothing but food that was fermented in some way.
Exactly.
For how long?
An entire year. So it was January 1 to January 1. The only thing that was non-fermented that I allowed was water. So all food and other than water, all drinks had to be fermented.
Now you mentioned some like cured meats, things like that. What are some of the things people might be surprised actually are fermented?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much misunderstanding about what fermentation even is, and it's a really hard thing to define because it's just this kind of vague process of microbial transformation from the foods we eat. So it's hard to even define it. Like once you start getting into the real scientific technical definitions, you'll lay out this groundwork, and then you'll be able to pick out something that contradicts it or that's clearly fermented that doesn't fall within those guidelines. So it's a hard thing to define, and we'll use different words like cultured for certain things.
Yeah.
Cultured butter is engages in fermentation, or yogurt will not say that it's fermented. It'll have live and active cultures or whatever.
And enzymes and all of that stuff. They start throwing these marketing terms at you.
So it's easy to get confused. And it's and so many things you think of pickles floating in a jar, but then if you apply that same kind of thought process to meat, you're like, meat floating in a jar? Like how would that work? It's it includes salami and pepperoni and all those cured meats as well.
I think of like alcohol, obviously the first thing you think about when you don't have any basis of knowledge of what fermentation really is, like you immediately assume like, oh, so you can get drunk off of salami.
Right.
Like that, so I'm just thinking there's alcohol involved.
Alcohol? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I had a conversation with a friend a few years ago, like way years ago, way before I got into this, where we're like, could you make some kind of alcohol out of milk, or like could you ferment milk? And we kept having this argument of like, what would fermented milk be? And then like after like 10 minutes, I'm embarrassed to say, we were like, oh wait, cheese.
Yeah. I feel I have to acknowledge I probably have been cheese drunk at some point.
Oh, for sure.
Didn't have anything to do with booze, but just a cheese.
That's
cheese coma.
Possibly an alternate title for the Fermented Man. I could have easily called it Cheese Drunk.
Cheese drunk.
And that would have been accurate.
You spent a year eating nothing but this. Obviously, you were allowed to have beer and things like that, so it wasn't too bad. But would you do it again? Would you recommend it? Is this going to be the next diet craze fad thing?
It's certainly not something I set out to do to get onto Oprah or Dr. Phil and recommend people follow in my footsteps. Yeah, I mean it was something I think needed to be done to show people kind of the extremes of this, that it's not necessarily a diet that you need to go to such extremes to follow.
Right.
I think you should just include fermented foods in your diet and feel comfortable, around microbes, including bacteria in your food sometimes.
You hear bacteria and you think you're going to get sick.
Right,
You
exactly.
immediately jump to that conclusion of like, oh, bacteria. Yeah, you want to get the bacteria off of it. Douse that salami and Purell. Let's get the bacteria out.
Right. So we have this whole phobia of germs, and like there are germs and there are bacteria and viruses that will get you sick, but a lot of bacteria are healthy and have been coexisting in our bodies for as long as we've been a species. So
yeah.
I think it's important to normalize these fermented foods and our relationship with microbes, and realize that a lot of them are actually completely necessary for our survival.
What is the food that over the course of the year that you just found out that you really enjoyed, and then on the opposite, you tasted it once and you're like, never having that again?
So the hardest food for me to stomach, I actually expected it to be something else. I went to Iceland at the end of the year as like a kind of a grand finale.
Right.
And they have this tradition of rotten shark meat that they eat.
I've heard about this because I want to go to Iceland.
Yeah, and Iceland's a phenomenal country, and I thought it would be a really fitting conclusion to the year, eating this Karl. It's shark meat that when you try and eat it fresh, when they would try and live off of it because they were desperate, it makes you vomit blood, basically.
Oh,
it's super poisonous.
Wow.
Yeah, but the conversion is what makes it edible,
But
right?
fermentation, has this amazing ability to render things edible and nutritious. So you can eat it after it's fermented, and it's ammonia. It's burning your throat, and it's this incredibly potent smell. But it was not as bad as a lot of people kind of make it out to be. The thing that really horrified me was called century eggs. And these eggs that are cured for months, and they turn green and kind of mucusy. And they look like geodes.
Oh, I've seen this on
dark green mucus egg yolk that has the texture of kind of like gummy candy.
They have them chopped when they really want to screw with people.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it didn't taste that bad, but the texture and sight of it kind of buries itself in your brain.
So if you didn't see it, you probably would have been okay.
If I hadn't seen it, I'd probably be okay, but I don't think I could ever eat that again.
Oof.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you for taking that journey for us and not having it.
Happy too. Yeah.
I am so interested in this book, and I have to say this, and I know I can say this because I've known you for a long time. You're insane. Like, you're out of your mind for doing this.
Absolutely.
I'm glad that you did, because I am really looking forward to reading it. The Fermented Man, a year on the front lines of a food revolution. Make sure you check it out. I'm very excited about every time I see that you guys at Kent Falls come out with a new beer too. So you've nourished my brain and also my need for delicious beer at the same time. So where can people all throughout the Hudson Valley can find the book, all major bookstores, things like that?
It should be, it's Amazon, I think, is releasing the book a few days late, just because Amazon's kind of a bigger, bulkier, organization. But it's out today. It should be in bookstores. If your local bookstore doesn't have it, you can always request it, and they'll be able to get it in.
Awesome.
Also doing a release party this Saturday night in Beacon at Stock Up.
Awesome.
So I'll have copies of the book there if you're local, and stop by Stock Up in Beacon and get one right from me.
Very cool. Congratulations, man. I know this is a very ambitious and very, very difficult project. So I'm glad to see it worked out, and I'm really looking forward to checking out the book, man. Thanks, Derek.
Thank you very much.